Okay, thank you all for being here and yeah, coming to hear us talk. There's many familiar faces here, some that I'm not familiar yet, but it's wonderful to see you. And yeah, thank you for being here to listen to the three of us talk about art and business. I want to kind of set the stage for what we're about to talk about because art and business obviously is a very wide field, and I'm sure we cannot touch on everything there is to be said about those two kind of disciplines colliding with each other. But we want to talk about how art matters beyond a aesthetic point in a business setting. You know, we all know that art will make a beautiful environment, but what does it do beyond that? And yeah, and there's different applications of it as well. So in different sectors, art will behave differently, will be used differently. So that's will probably be the main part of our talk today, and then we also want to talk to you because I see there are many artists here, and I'm sure some business leaders as well. How the two can work with each other effectively, and how yeah, artists and business people can work with each other. So first off, I want to introduce my two wonderful speakers here today. I want to start with Charlie White. He is the founder and leader of Char Network. He brings together entrepreneurs and he's a connector and advocate of business, philanthropy, and art. Through I met him through an interaction where he really showed his unique ability to connect people and show appreciation for art and outside people outside of the arts. We call them outsiders. No, we don't. But yeah, he just has a wonderful gift of connecting people and bringing people together. So with the Char Network, he has built a platform centered on strategic partnerships, experiential programming, and community engagement. Through his work with artists, nonprofits, businesses, and cultural organizations, he has demonstrated how creativity and collaboration can drive meaningful impact. And then to my right here, Katherine Wagner. She is probably one of the most influential art advocates of Dallas in the last 2 decades. So she used to lead the Business Council for the Arts. She did wonderful work there for 14 years, connecting businesses and artists and really creating a whole new generation of art leaders as well with their programming there. So before then, she used to be the CEO of the Dallas Visual Arts Society and did wonderful work there. So right now, she is not the CEO anymore of the Business Council of the Arts. She retired from that, but is still active in the arts community. She's chairing and advising for multiple nonprofit organizations that deal with art. So she's still very active and has wonderful insights, I'm sure both of them will have. So, yes. So I want to jump in with asking Charlie, um, when a company acquires an artwork, what are they really buying?
Yeah, well, and first of all, thanks for having us. So excited to be here with all of you. I think what I see in that is it's more than just an object or a decoration. They're really emotional resonance, not only for
Okay.
for their clients, but also for their employees too, right? It's the environment in which they work, and then it's customer facing. So folks coming into their space. And I did a panel recently with Ginger Curtis, and it was on biophilic design and neuroaesthetics. And she said something that really resonated with me, which is that no good is neutral. Either you go in and it makes you feel good, or it makes you feel not so good. And it really stuck with me because I think that businesses have an opportunity to connect with their clients and then connect with the employees on that emotional level and build that culture identity. And what does this space say to our clients? Or what does it say to the folks that work there too, outside of just decorating and using space?
Yeah, it's a lot about, you know, you are communicating with that as well. You know, there is a certain kind of communication that you put out with with having art in a space, and as you say, it creates an environment that is either comfortable and people are happy to work there or not. So that's I think a really big part of art and kind of the sub level of what art can do in those spaces. So
And I'll just add kind of from a branding perspective too. It tells you a lot about that environment, that business. Are they investing in art? What is important to them? So it's not so transactional, but they're really trying to create an environment for the folks that enter their doors. And I think that resonates with me. I know this when I go into places, and you may not look at furniture or how you stack it. If there's a beautiful piece of art in the wall with it, I think it leaves a lasting impression for that business on you.
I think so too. So that's really interesting. I think that seeing that sub layer that art can have, and make creating memorable experiences. So yeah, I was saying earlier that art also behaves very differently in different environments, and depending on the industry or the sector you are in, it behaves just totally differently. I was actually talking to you, Catherine, earlier this week about this at a meeting where we both are actually very hands-on with selecting art for a public healthcare space. But you were mentioning that art really has different purposes in different spaces. So if you want to maybe talk about your experiences or your how in different industries, we'll go into further detail about each individual kind of industry, but how they behave differently.
I guess this is on. Okay, can you hear me? So, unlike Charlie, I have a soft voice, so I need the microphone. So, what William is talking about is that we are working together along with Pamela Nelson, and I'm sure there are other artists in this room, Carolyn Brown, who will have artwork in the new Salvation Army Dallas Social Services Campus, Connie. And so I don't know if you all know about this. Can I just digress for a
Please,
bit?
please
Okay.
do.
So we know how many people are of need in Dallas, and we keep talking about the homeless here. Well, the Salvation Army in Dallas, in North Texas, is building a 21-acre $200 million campus on Regal Row and I-35. So if you drive there, you'll see it. It's going up really quickly. And so as they were, before any of the buildings got started, this was a year and a half ago, we were asked to, what would you do if we asked you to put art in that space? So William has been really working on that. And earlier this week, his category that he works on is the emergency services building, one of the hardest. So thank you for everything you're doing.
It is a challenge, and I'm really happy to do it. It's a wonderful initiative.
So yes, I used to run business council for the arts, and one of the things I was really interested in is the fact that business is not monolithic. I mean, arts isn't either, but a lot of times people just think, oh, business. If I can get a big business to support my whatever, I'm done. And it's not like that. There are many different kinds of businesses, and they use the arts in different ways. And so that's where I got really interested and had just amazing board members that helped me start arts and healthcare, really looking at arts and healthcare. Arts and healthcare, North Texas, it's a $47 billion industry, right? So how do the arts work in healthcare? And they work by evidence-based art, and I would love to tell you more about that. We'll go into that later. Proves by studies, many studies at many universities and hospitals, that art can lower blood pressure. It can lower heart rate. It can trigger parasympathetic responses, which means like the alarms in your body are not going off. Art can do that. So hospitals are using art a lot exactly for that purpose. That's different than how a hotel will use art. So think about the hotels you've been to. I mean, the thing that hotels have to do is distinguish themselves, right? And they also, because they have so much to do with tourism, they have got to show that you are in Dallas. So you've got hotels like the Renaissance in Plano that the Moon family, Sam Moon's family, runs, right? You've got Hall, the Hall Arts Hotel, Craig Hall, and they have a basis in local art. They want to employ the work of local artists, but they may take it in different ways. So, like Renaissance Hotel, it's called West of Zen, their collection. Work by local artists, but with an Asian flair, because they are Asian. Hall, lots of local artists, but Hall is also a national company. And so they will include, they've got some inclusion of national and even international artists. And they are branding as a luxury hotel. So the best of art, but also local, lots of local imagery. So that's hotels. I mean, law firms are kind of quirky. If they have a curator, they may have, if they're a very, sort of cutting edge boutique hotel law firm, have a curated collection that looks like XYZ. But so often I have found that law firms build their collections by, Frank the attorney went to Santa Fe and he bought this piece for his office, and the law firm reimbursed him. And then Joe or Mary went to someplace and they bought this, and the collection is like kind of all over the place because the different attorneys bought what they liked, and so it may not be such a integrated collection. But a lot of times too, for law firms, it is branding. And what I really love, just interests me, I'm sorry if I digress.
I love it.
Okay, is some of the older, more sort of genteel law firms that have not changed very much over the years might still have like a lot of that oak paneling and a lot of Remingtons in their collection, because that was the big thing to collect among law firms to show that you had longevity, that you were of the area, that you sort of bought not say, I don't want to say bought into the Texas mythology, but you were part of that. So a lot of these older firms have that era art, and you can just walk in and you can see the bluebonnet paintings and the Remingtons. So that's just a start.
A wonderful kind of classification of what art can do in different spaces, and I love that you're giving those local, examples of how particular artists, particular collectors, particular institutions collect art, and for what reason, And I do want to go a little bit more into detail. Maybe starting with healthcare, because I know you did a lot of research for the Salvation Army campus that we're working on. So I want to go into that, and thank you for being able to share that. I wasn't quite sure if we could already, if it was under seal or anything like that. So it's wonderful that we can share that wonderful project that we're working on there for our neighbors here. So I want to start with healthcare. So what are the unique challenges that art in healthcare is facing, and especially with the Salvation Army campus in mind, maybe. What are we trying to do with art in that space?
Right, and so that's so interesting. Because they really have a unique position in social services. And I will say that when we got started, I know you all knew this, but I did not. I thought the Salvation Army was a social services organization, knew it was Christian, but didn't realize it was actually its own church. And so that's been very interesting. But I will say that the Salvation Army, all the people that we've worked with have been tremendous and so appreciative of the committee members that we have, which is William and Pamela, Courtney Crothers, that is a curator for UT Southwestern, Chip Van Pelt, Lynn Rushton Reed, who is our public art coordinator, Gail Saxon. So we have great people on our committee. We had to learn a lot about the Salvation Army and their clientele. So one important thing is there will be, on this new campus, there will be 600 people at any one time, but they are short-term in emergency services, longer term in Harbor House, which is for women who have been abused and trafficked. They get to stay longer. There is a family area in supportive living where families can stay for 18 months in a beautiful apartment. They will be able to go and take their families to a cafeteria where all the food is free. I mean, it's just, this is going to be an incredible place. But people are coming and going at different intervals. Some people have some needs, like the women who have been abused. What we're putting in there are images that are all very uplifting, images of nature, images of women. We have some of Pamela's work there. In some other areas, we were told our clients are not mentally stable. Therefore, we cannot put anything that could be weaponized. So no framed pictures, no sculpture. So what we all opted to do as a committee is use solely the work of local and regional artists, have it printed on vinyl. If it gets graffitied, if it gets slashed, if it gets whatever, we can reprint that work and replace it. And it's still very local. It's all the work of local artists, and it's all meant to fit each exact area. The veterans area, you have some veterans, women, children. So that was particular to the Salvation Army, and I will give the Salvation Army such great credit because they have not pushed us into any kind of religious imagery at all. This place is meant to be a place that welcomes everyone. So there is no, there's no having to do this or having to do that. They've just been so great to work with, I think.
They really have been. It's all contemporary living artists who produce their work, and they're not necessarily bound to religious, backgrounds. And it's really, I mean, this committee that we're working with is just amazing to deal with, and really appreciative of all the emerging or all the local artists that submitted their work to this cause. So it's a really wonderful environment to work in, and also it's it's such a special kind of solution that we found to integrate images of original artwork by original artists, and no reproductions or Getty images or something like that. Right. Really wonderful pieces that are being included. It's just a very unique challenge, I would say, to in that environment, because we are dealing with a lot of mental health issues. That is why we are counting it to, healthcare, which is a healthcare facility in its core. But it's just, obviously, you don't often have those challenges in every environment that you're working in. So this is a really unique solution for that environment.
And I just want to add, Charlie, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but one of my all-time pet peeves with art and healthcare is that a lot of the consulting companies, like we place art in public places, in corporations, in hospitals. It really, really bothers me when they have their book of licensed work that they use over and over and is mediocre. That just makes me crazy.
I actually just had a conversation with someone about this yesterday, not in the healthcare space, but it was one of those types of companies. And going back to what you were saying, using local artists, how important that is. And it doesn't create a cultural resonance. If you're in DFW, you should be using DFW artists potentially. And actually, my background prior to art was in the mental health field and the healthcare field. And especially in behavioral health, we had an eating disorder residential program in Scottsdale, and it was a new program. It was so important to be intentional about the art that we used in that space, because this was going to be where kids were for anywhere from 30 to 60 days in a very high acuity facility, but it's a residential setting, and so I had to be very intentional with the colors and just the different mediums that were used, because art has the ability to heal people. And kind of going back to what I said earlier, when I did the talk on the biophilic design and neuroaesthetics, Ginger Curtis was the keynote speaker on that. And she got involved with that because one of her children got sick, and she read up on this doctor who took his patients out of the hospital into these cabins in the woods, and they got better quicker. And that might not be feasible with our healthcare system here, but what we can do is we can bring nature inside, and that can be with art, the different types of art that we bring in, the colors, the fabrics, the different mediums, and really think of the neuroaesthetics of the space. And so it's just very important. And again, we know art can heal and has that ability. And while maybe taking folks out in the woods is not feasible, what we can do is bring kind of that nature and that environment inside.
Right. So I want to share a study that meant so much to me, and you can look it up. It's easy to find, or if you want to ask William, it's like just a 2-page thing. I can send it to you. You can send it out.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay. So we're talking about evidence-based art and biophilia. So this actually started in Texas. A fellow named Roger Ulrich, who headed up the architecture department at Texas A&M, had a theory, and his theory was that nature heals. So he found sort of a perfect scenario for testing out his theory, and it was a hospital where one wing was for gallbladder recovery patients. And interestingly enough, one side of the hallway, the patients all faced a stand of trees outside their window. On the other side, they faced a brick wall. So Mr. Ulrich never met a patient, so there's nothing anecdotal about this. He only looked at data. And what he found over a number of years was that the patients on the window side had earlier release, statistically significant fewer complaints about the staff. The staff had fewer complaints about them, but the amazing thing was they could more often use tablets for painkiller versus injected painkillers. And then along came somebody else after that study, and they said, well, that's interesting because that has an economic aspect. The injected painkillers, more time from the nursing staff, but also are more expensive. And so they actually quantified what the difference was financially, which I'm sorry I can't remember exactly, but it was significant for patients on the window side. So then from that came from Mr. Ulrich, who now I guess lives in Sweden. I tried to get him as a speaker, but he did studies on, okay, if a window will do that, if it's through the window, you're not feeling the breeze, you're not feeling the temperature, you're seeing an image, then could visual art do that? And then there have been so many studies, like at Dexter, at Johns Hopkins, at University of Florida is a big one, that prove over and over again the importance of nature as an image. And the more the patient is confined. So I'm doing some volunteer work at Parkland, and I've placed images of nature in all of the infusion booths. Because people sit there for so long. I mean, people, you can walk in there, it's young people, it's old people, it's every kind of person sitting there just getting infused, right? So we put images of nature. So the more you've lost mobility or you're confined to a space, the more important it is to have nature images. But like, for example, if you go to UT Southwestern, and Courtney Crothers is their amazing curator. On the public areas, then you'll find some abstract art, because that's just more public, people are mobile, and there's some very, very first-rate abstract public sculpture and paintings and so forth in those public spaces. So it's not that nature has to be every blooming place, but the less mobility, the more important nature is.
That's so fascinating to hear those studies, and that is really based in evidence. And it's not just a phrase that we use as artist has the power to heal. It is actually has the power to heal.
Right.
It's actually happening, and through multiple studies, and it's so interesting. Like that. Our evolutionary brain, kind of needing images of nature to help them heal, and I think our brain is just so still wired on that evolutionary basis, So it's just so fascinating to see and hear that. Um, but yeah, I want to maybe move forward with from away from healthcare a little bit, and yeah, direct a question to Charlie. Okay, yeah, about the effects that art can have in a law firm, for example. The in a law firm, as you were saying earlier, you want to establish kind of trust and credibility by the pieces that you're showing and being part of a certain kind of yeah community. So how, especially with your background in art advisory and your experiences there, how can art do that in a law firm setting, for example?
Yeah, well, I would say for most of us, when you go to the law firm, if you go to a law firm, it's probably you're not probably there for a pleasant reason, right? I mean, no one's like, "Oh, I'm excited to go to the attorney's office." So not, outside of it just being for sophistication, I think there is an ability. And we were talking about spaces earlier. And there's no neutral space to really. So someone's not in that fight or flight mode that they can relax a little bit. Maybe you're at the attorney's office for a variety of reasons. So I think that they're outside of it just being for, like you were mentioning earlier, some of the attorney's offices, what they had done prior. I think there's an ability to support the clients from an emotional standpoint, because oftentimes that's what they're going there for as well. So that's kind of how I see it. I think you touched really nicely on that earlier. I don't know if there's something you want to add to that.
For law firms?
Yeah.
Well, one thing I think is interesting about law firms is, we've been talking about, I mean, I guess everybody's been talking about downtown Dallas and what's going on with downtown Dallas. And what is really interesting, and there was a real estate, commercial real estate person that pointed this out to me a couple of years ago, was that law firms, like, and I won't mention any names, but like biggest, most important law firms in Dallas, a lot of them are giving up their downtown offices, which at one time needed to be really big, to have all of those files, those paper files, and they are moving to uptown new office buildings, and everything is online, so they don't need those files. They're paying the same amount of money, they're getting a smaller amount of office space, but they're getting more, like you say, sophistication. And I think that the art, a lot of them are embracing art. These particular set of firms are embracing art that is much more sophisticated as well.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. So there is a brand new, well, not a new firm, but a large firm that just moved to Uptown, Sidley Austin, large global firm, and I'm doing something with them in the fall, and it's for a group of female attorneys, and they want to learn more about art so that they know how to speak about art with their clients too. So there's kind of that angle as well, and I think empowering the attorneys so that they can talk to their clients is kind of a different avenue there as well. And you mentioned something about the larger footprint and kind of going into the digital space. There's not, you don't need as large of an office anymore, but I think that actually helps, because then you can invest in just a few pieces of really great art in your space, very, very curated, again, and have that positive impact on the clients coming into your office.
Yep, that sounds like an interesting project. Can I sit in?
Yes, actually, I'm going to need a panel, so you're a wealth of knowledge, so it'd be lovely.
Yeah, I mean, that underscores the importance of art as a social catalyst too. It it inspires conversation besides what you're having to talk about. It's something that you want to talk about. Is having a fun, inspiring, creative conversation with someone, apart from the legal business that you're having to face. So it's.
And you made a joke earlier about, like, kind of one of the attorneys kind of picking art from wherever. Shockingly, maybe not shockingly, but surprising to me, there are some attorneys in Dallas who are big art collectors, and I worked with a few of them. And there's actually one who is a collector of a gallery that I work with here, and his wife is an interior designer, and they actually host client events at their law firm too. So it kind of becomes an event space as well. And so they were very intentional about the art that they put in their space, because they knew that folks would be coming in there often.
Right. That is a really good point, that it is a lot done for the clients, not so much for the employees. There are other firms that their art is really, a lot of their art is for employees.
that's actually what I want to move next as well. Is in a corporate headquarter, like where there's a big turnaround on different, people, especially employees, walking in and out of there all day, spending a lot of time in those facilities where, if there's a uncomfortable environment, it may not be as enjoyable to work at. Especially corporate headquarters. We often think, concrete, gray buildings, not really fun. And there's art can really have a big impact there. So if you talk about like how art can create a certain kind of company culture in those spaces as well.
Sure, do you want to take that first?
Well, I've worked in those spaces before, and it's very important. Actually, I work in the arts and I also work in behavioral health. There's always been a nice crossover, and I'm really passionate about behavioral health and also autism care. And I was going in the office just on one day a week, and the art was terrible. It was so terrible, and I could feel that the folks there, in my mind, just working on the art side, I was like, if we could get better art in here, I feel like the people would be happier. They're doing call centers, and they're also dealing with families in crisis too. So depending on obviously the type of work, but corporate headquarters can be very stale, and you have the ability. I was kind of talking more about the clients, but you can really change the culture of the organization, because a lot of companies talk about culture. If you work for a corporate office, one of the first things you're going to hear is like, "We love our culture here," and it's like, but is that true? How does that resonate? And then you go maybe into the office space, and it doesn't resonate. So I think it's incredibly important to, as much as it's important for client facing, it's also equally important for the folks that are going to be there 8 to 5, maybe 5 days a week.
I agree. I mean, one company I would like to call out as just doing an exceptional job. I cannot say enough good things about them, and I even have their credit card. Is Capital One. And so at BCA, we worked with Capital One basically from the time that I started there, and I think they're still working with Capital One. And Capital One, we may know it as a bank, but Capital One sees itself, and they will say, we see ourselves as a technology company. To go to the Capital One headquarters up in Plano, none of us, I can't, you can't, we can't just walk in there. It's all for the employees because there's so much data in there, and it's sensitive data, right? So they have guards and passes and all of that kind of thing. But they are so mindful of employee experience. So so they do collect art permanently. And they have, for example, I love the work of Billy Hassel. They have lots of work by him. Lots of work by other artists, not just Texas, but also Oklahoma, because they're covering a larger area. But we would also do programs for them 4 times a year that focused on Dallas artists or Dallas area artists. And they wanted them to run along, Asian American Pacific Islander Month, Hispanic, Latino Hispanic Month, and so forth. So we would choose the artists, we would choose the art, we would create the labels, but then there was an installation company, but that was all for the employees, nobody else. The artists could invite some people, and they would have a reception. So the artists could invite like family and friends, but other than that, it was not open to the public. It's only for the employees. And then in the pandemic, when so many employees were not in the office, we created just a library of 50 programs for them using local artists doing, we called it Take 10. I made up that name and I thought it was so good. And it was 10-minute art practices. And so, and then we would have the evidence base for it. So actually, if you, there are studies, if you doodle for 45 minutes, you will lower anxiety. And the way that's been measured is by the cortisol in your mouth, scientifically, right? So then we taught, like, okay, here's how to doodle. Here's how to crosshatch. Here's how to, do this and that. So we did lots of programs. I will say they were all for the employees. They were amazing. And they really wanted to support local artists. Their heart is in the right place.
That's wonderful to hear that a big corporation like that, really puts a big effort into employee appreciation, employee well-being, and local artists. That's just wonderful to hear, and I think it makes this big kind of corporation that's sometimes hard to grasp and hard to classify in a way, like it brings it down to a level where you can actually interact with it and feel the appreciation they have for their employees. It's wonderful. So yeah. So we were talking a lot about the um, employee side or the visitor side. So that's especially um, important in the hospitality realm. So you were talking about that earlier a little bit, where why hotels collect art and what they do with that, a certain kind of regional classification or yeah, trying to make a certain space be livable but also recognizable. So I'd love to talk more about the hospitality realm and how and why hotels will collect art. So
Yeah, I mean, I can start. So recently, there's a fabulous artist in the room with us tonight. Her name's Deborah Ferrari, and she and I do a lot of fun stuff together. And so the other day, we went out to Fort Worth on an upcoming project, and we were visiting the different hotels. And raise up hands. Have you been to the Auberge Hotel in Fort Worth? Anybody? Auberge? Must go. It is incredible. You been?
No,
It's incredible. It's my first time. Deborah had been telling me about it, and I feel like we lived in Dallas for 4 years, and I should have gone a long time ago. But what stuck out with me is, so we went to 3 different hotels, and I won't name the other 2, but this one stuck with me because the art was so good, and they actually feature art in the hotel rooms, in the lobby, the restaurants, all around the hotel, and it's for purchase as well. So you can support artists while also just having them on view. But the difference that I noticed, not with just how I felt, because I do remember when we got done with the day, it just stuck with me. Like I want to go back because there was so much great art. But I noticed that the hotel guests were interacting differently with that hotel than the other 2. I walked into one, it was a little bit sterile. It was contemporary modern, it was a beautiful space, but they had no art. And then we went into the Auberge, and I noticed like there was a couple right outside the restaurant. They were standing in front of a piece of work and talking about it. And when I started the Char Network, that was my goal because I feel that art is the ultimate connector. And I host a lot of different events and galleries, and a lot of times it's with business people. And I believe that what happens at these events and then what can happen in hospitality, 2 people, maybe strangers, find themselves in front of a piece of art and have a conversation together. And it's just really an ultimate connector. And I think we need connection, especially human connection, now more than ever. So that was an incredible experience. And then also, if you're familiar with the Crescent Hotel in Dallas, they have the Crescent Club. And they just recently brought in J.D. Miller's work. He's an artist featured at Samuel Lynn. They kept the wood paneling. The building, I think, is from 87 or 89. Yeah. So it's a beautiful building, and the architecture is great, but the art was very dated. And so instead of updating the architecture of the building or bringing in a designer to rip it out, they just updated art, and they brought in a lot of beautiful contemporary pieces, and it changed the environment. And so we actually had an event there recently, and folks were noticing the art for the first time versus just kind of something fading in the distance. Again, it's a connector, and spaces aren't neutral.
yeah, I'm so glad you bring up I think the Bowie House or Auberge Hotel, in
House,
Fort Worth, because it's a really interesting kind of concept that they have. They invite artists and galleries to show work there, have it on display, and it's really a wonderful, unique kind of experience that you have there because I feel like all the hotel guests, they interact with each other. It is not, oh, you just go up to your room and stay there and use it as a facility. It's really like a social connector. And in the bar or kind of lobby area, people are just sitting with each other, chatting and really making friends with each other. And the catalyst for that is again the art that's on the walls because it's so special. Yeah.
Yeah, I should have said Bowie House. So it's part of the Auberge collection, and we're actually getting an Auberge collection hotel in Knox Henderson. So I'd be curious to see what that might look like. I'm not sure if they're going to be doing, maybe a similar concept. But I'm obviously still thinking about it. It was just an amazing use of my time, and we had a great day. And I just won't forget how people connected with that hotel differently than the other two we went into.
So do they have events, or do you have to be a guest there?
To stay at the hotel?
Yeah.
So, well, they have a restaurant downstairs. So we were not guests. We were obviously visiting the hotel, so we had lunch there. There were people at the bar just having a drink. And then they had event spaces as well. So you probably could do a really special art event at the Louis House in Fort Worth. But yes, if you haven't been, you must go. And it was a great lunch, too. You know.
So my hotel recommendation is in Houston, and it's the Lancaster Hotel. And it's owned by Jay Shin, local artist. And when I walked in there, I think, Pamela, you have a piece. I saw James Searles. I was just like, wait a minute, there's so many Dallas artists. What is this place? And then when I asked the desk, but I don't like, you've got all this great original art. I know so many of these artists, and they said, oh yeah, this is Jay Shin's. But that is a great hotel. Same thing, great bar, great everything. But if you're going to Houston, I'd stay there.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful hotel recommendation. So for both those hotels, actually, it's worth a trip.
Yeah, we could be on the marketing team for.
That's right. Yeah, plan some staycations here. So we're talking about these wonderful collections, but we also talked about what not to do. You know, like bad collections. Like kind of okay, it's really, you know, individuals just bringing in their own art or not having a certain vision for a space, and
there are also sad collections.
Yeah.
Can I give you an example?
Please.
Okay. So in the 80s, Frito-Lay did an amazing job. Frito-Lay and Pepsi did an amazing job. A fellow named Terry Passberg was in charge of collecting the art for their campuses in Plano and did just an amazing job. Beautiful, beautiful art collection. Well, fast forward, and this was a number of years ago, maybe it's changed, but I had someone contact me and say, you know, I'm not an art person, I'm not an executive, I'm really more in the custodial area of the Frito-Lay campus, but I would just like to show somebody what the art looks like now. And I said, oh, I would be so interested. Maybe it's changed, so I just want to give that caveat that this may not be occurring now. But I went there, and he said, yeah, I had to rescue all these pieces. They were like down in the basement, and there were some major, major artworks, prints, for example, that had foxing, like the little mole dots on them. One that had slipped in its frame, and it's just like, why is nobody taking care of this collection? And I think that sometimes, first of all, so much depends on corporate leadership. I mean, if you have a corporate leader who doesn't care about art, forget it. And, sometimes corporations really have these great collections. Then the next person or next generation down, they just don't care. The art goes to the basement, or they stop collecting and supporting art. And so another company that really was so prominent at one time in Dallas was ExxonMobil. And you probably all remember when ExxonMobil came down here and they moved their headquarters from New York, there were people like Elliot Catarula and Ed Honor, who was head of the ExxonMobil Foundation. They were so greatly art supporting. I mean, they just supported the arts like crazy. Buying art, supporting arts organizations, and then with a change in leadership, nothing. It just stopped. So that can happen too. So you have corporate collections that have their heyday, and then I can think of another bank. It's a great bank. They collected all of their Texas art. They're not collecting anymore, and their collection looks kind of old. It just is not very fresh. So,
yeah, and that actually has two questions kind of that I have here written down, kind of baked within them. So one is, what should you consider before making your first purchase or build a collection? What is your intention? How do you become, start a relevant collection? And then second of all, how do you keep it being relevant and not have it age? How do you go about that? Where do you start as let's say a company wants to start collecting art, and what is the first kind of initial idea that you would have to create to do that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it would be, first of all, mission and purpose. So, what kind of a company are we? Like, technology company. And so, the top, the biggest industry sectors right now in North Texas are finance, technology, and manufacturing. I would be really interested in like having a panel of just finance people and getting them to start buying art, right? So, what is your mission? What are you trying to accomplish? First of all, get the stakeholders in the room, and then budget, and then long-term plan, and then care. I mean, that's one bad thing is when art is collected, or worse yet, when art is donated to a corporation, or I mean to a nonprofit, and there's no plan for it, and it's like, well, now you're going to have to take care of it, and that's going to cost you money and space. So you have to think about all of these things from like the get-go.
I mean, I think you tapped on most on budgeting, and every company has a mission statement, and what does that culture say to not only the employees but obviously client facing as well, and diversifying the voices too. All companies, I would imagine, have some level of diversity in them, especially large organizations. So it's important to have diverse voices when it comes to art in those spaces. But I think the biggest thing is what you said. What's the mission statement of the organization? Because then that allows, especially our consultants, to identify, okay, who is this company? What are they about? And then helping to build a collection. And then obviously budget is a big piece.
Yeah. Yes. I think one thing that interests me right now is that one of the things, when I was running BCA, one of the like our basic pillars, because I had an amazing board of directors, and they truly were heartfelt about this, was supporting DEI. And for so many years, DEI was really important, and it was something that the arts could uniquely do in a way that was not preaching, not sanctimonious, but it's just like, okay, you have a diverse workforce and diverse clients. Art, we'll bring the artist in. You can show art from all these different people with different backgrounds that can talk about it. But now, with this climate, and with universities having all their DEI, I mean, public universities having all their DEI offices shut down, I feel like the companies that are supporting DEI are like the companies I would want to support, and I would like to know how they're using art. So that to me is just like a personal thing, but whatever. So, soapbox.
Yeah, but I think as you said, also like a generational turnover. Like, there might be a really avid supporter of the arts, but then the next generation comes in, or the company kind of shifts around, and there's a different kind of leadership, and then the art program might fall behind, or lose in relevance for the company. So how do you think you can kind of cement that, the idea of having wonderful art program in a company, and have it be sustainable, without being volatile to that?
I mean, so I'm going to make a recommendation. So at BCA, we had a program called Leadership Arts that was founded by Ray Nasher, who founded our organization. And Leadership Arts is a program, it's a 9-month program, starts in September, ends in May, specifically for business professionals. And the idea was these business professionals from, Frost Bank and, all of these different, lots and lots of different companies, want to forward their career. Many of them have art in their background. I think of a friend of mine who, at one of the major law firms, she was an art teacher before she was an attorney. So a lot of them have art in their background already. They want to find a way to get back to it. And this program is a really wonderful program that is a 9-month course on board leadership and best practices. And so what happens after somebody graduates is that they get placed on a nonprofit board. So, for example, Frost Bank, I'm on the board of the Creative Arts Center, and we have an amazing treasurer, Amanda Rodriguez, and she went through the program at BCA, the Leadership Arts Program. Now she's our treasurer. So that also gives us a lead into Frost Bank. So now we're much more likely to get funding from Frost Bank for one thing. We have not just her expertise and her understanding of what a board member does, because so many board members don't get it, um, right? But it's also a connection to the company. So if you can keep that going generationally, you will continue to have those advocates for the arts in those companies. So for anybody that's interested, I think there's a meet and greet on the 24th for Leadership Arts.
And if I could add something too, generationally, maybe the taste changed too, right? Maybe the C-suite team changes, or maybe it's a company that gets passed down. Who knows where it goes? But I guess the point I'm trying to make is that maybe their interest in art changes. So maybe it's the responsibility of art consultants and curators to have those conversations. It may not be that they're not interested in art, they may be intimidated by it, may not know how to have the conversations that maybe the generation before them had. So I think that's also important to point out too. But again, that's probably the responsibility of consultants too.
I'm thinking of a major energy company whose past generations really supported the arts. The current younger generation is all about the environment. And so I think part of getting their involvement in the arts would be, how do the arts tie to environmental advocacy?
And also like health and wellness, well-being,
Right.
experiential. Yeah.
Right. And not, because the older generation, it was art for one thing, but yeah, kind of how does that tie into what you're interested in?
Yeah, so I think keeping that in mind, having future generations in mind when you start a collection, like maybe maybe in 10 years or something like that, most younger Gen Z might not be interested in old masters or whatever, or they might be, like you never know, but maybe planning accordingly, like having be adaptable to new challenges that are, that future generations might be facing with that existing art collection, and that's actually brings me to my next question: is what are companies doing today that they didn't do 10 years ago? What are new developments that you guys are seeing in company best practices that were developed in the last few years?
I think the interest in biophilia and in how does art work in not just evidence-based art, but then also like looking at color in evidence-based design. There are studies that show, right, like blue reduces your heart rate the best, blue reduces anxiety the best. Green comes after it because it's like in the middle of the spectrum, very easy to see. Blue and green, red, no red. Red, fire engines, stop signs. Red actually increases your heart rate. So I think companies are more attuned to that in their environment. I did want to get back to one thing. I think when a company puts together a collection, they should think about, do they want or do they not want successive employees and generations to de-accession the work? Like, is the founder of the company like, you're going to live with this painting until, or is it live with this painting, but you can sell it and buy something else in the future? I think that's an important thing to think about. I think one thing that's interesting to me is companies using, or I will say, people interested in the arts who want to be involved in the arts, going for degrees in data visualization, where they use their art background, but they're also employing data. So, this is what the data looks like, and then you create some kind of visualization so people can understand pictorially what that looks like. I do see some companies using that kind of imagery in like video installations. So that's new.
That is very new, and that's also, if you say maybe video, being a changing, able like easier to evolve imagery through video installation, for example, or also I'm also thinking art as a financial asset in certain ways too. You create a art collection, you are having those assets, and they might appreciate in value over time. being able to sell off these pieces later on for maybe a profit, but at least what you bought them for before, and then being able to invest that in new pieces and new artists, and maybe even emerging artists. You start collecting emerging artists, and then they appreciate over time in value and appreciation. So there's definitely a space for emerging artists to be in corporate collections of all sorts. Because they're first of all, they're often local. They support local town, local community, but also as a personal interest for the company itself. I think because of that reason, they start out at lower prices, and then they appreciate in value, and yeah, are a great asset for companies to have.
Right. I mean, I think that's one thing, going back to like how companies begins to think about collecting art is, do you want a collection that appreciates? Because I'm thinking about like Holland and Knight, they do have some great pieces that will appreciate, but they've also collected a lot of work. They're down in the arts district. They've also collected a lot of work from Booker T students. And whether that appreciates or not, we don't know. They're high school students.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a. Well, I do have another question because it's connected to that. How do artists, emerging artists especially, like how do they get connected to companies? Because there is definitely a avenue for young artists who get connected to those companies, but they're often, like as you said, like maybe perceived as these like monolithic monsters that are, it's hard to get a way in. Exactly. Like how do I even get to talk to someone at a company, and show them my portfolio potentially? Like, if you just send it there, like, will you ever hear back? Or it's also that maybe that you know that fear of being rejected from a company. Like, how do you would you recommend like approaching that?
Well, I would first say for young artists, and actually any artist, is just to put yourself out there, and reach out to consultants. So I'm actually working with an independent artist, a newer independent artist as of recent, and he reached out to me and we had a conversation, and now I'm able to have a new kind of artist to work with. So I think it's important to put yourself out there, because we're always looking for new artists as a consultant to work with, and I can't find everything on my own. So I mean, using social media, that's where social media can be a really great tool. But again, reaching out to the consultants, because like you and myself have these connections with these businesses, and I'm always looking to diversify the voices in the room.
And I would say definitely apply to new talent. So, I mean,
Coming up.
there's so many artists that I have seen first here during New Talent. So, yeah, you should talk about
You
that.
guys are doing something wonderful.
Yes, yeah, we are having a wonderful exhibition coming up at the end of the month. June 27th is the opening, so mark your calendars. It is a emerging artist exhibition where we put out an open call for artists. They submit their work, and then we invite a juror to select and curate the artists, and then we have them here for 2 months, really, throughout the summer to exhibit their work and make them be seen. And really wonderful, talented artists arose from that long-standing effort. It's the 33rd year this year that this exhibition has been going on. So it's a long-standing and really wonderful initiative, and we've seen so many really great artists that have gone on to being nationally recognized start here. So it's a great thing that I'm very proud of, and really happy to support these artists. Yeah.
And I will say there are artists that I'm like, why did I not buy that at the New Talent Show? Because now it's 5 times as much. So if you're looking for art, the New Talent Show is a place to come. Yes.
And then also something I think we've all been involved in is Art for Advocacy. So you can submit to that as well. I was on the underwriting committee for a couple of years and just involved just as a patron. But that's another organization, and I believe you're on the curatorial committee.
You're
and I don't
chairing.
Yes. Chairing with Alec de Jesus this year.
You might
Yes.
want to talk a little bit about that. I don't know what the requirements are to submit, but I would imagine there's different levels of artists that do submit.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, there's very recognized artists.
I didn't hear what the organization was.
Oh, It's called Art for Advocacy, and it benefits DCAC, which is Dallas Children's Advocacy Center.
Yes, and they do wonderful work for abused children in the DFW Metroplex. So they do wonderful, wonderful work, and that is their main fundraiser is a art auction every year where they raise. I think last year they raised over $2 million for their efforts, and they're the main address where abused children and their families go to get help and get safe first and for all, and but then also reintegrate and they just do wonderful work. And there's different tiers. So there's gallery represented artists who submit their work there. Then galleries also submit work for consideration as a donation there. It requires a donation to that nonprofit, but it's a wonderful cause, as I said. But it's a wonderful way because there's also artists who are not as recognized yet submitting their work there and being selected, and they have a wonderful output or kind of platform to be seen and have their work be seen. So being aware of that nonprofit is a great thing, and just submitting your work there. Yeah.
And I think for that event specifically, there's like 800 attendees.
Yes.
That people are, and really all walks of life too. So we're kind of talking about the business aspect. These are like business guys who maybe they're interested in art, maybe not, but they're seeing your art. So that's an opportunity to even get your art into a commercial space, and I think that would be an important play there too.
Yeah, exactly. And people with sometimes deep pockets too, because they are able to afford buying a table there at that event. So it's just as you said, any kind of way to put yourself out there, put your work out there, and just be seen is, I think, really important. You cannot participate in showing your work and having it being recognized without making yourself vulnerable sometimes too, but making it be seen is the most important thing. Yeah.